So I'm going to start with asking a couple of questions. And I want you to really think about these questions. And if God is leading you to say, yes, that's me, or whatever, feel free to do that. But I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. So, how many of you truly believe that God has a plan for you? Truly believe God has a plan for you, right? Absolutely. Okay, now, how many of you get frustrated that you don't know his plan? Right? Yeah, see, a lot more hands shot up for that one. All right? So I got the opportunity to go on an Emmaus walk, to be the assistant spiritual director of an Emmaus walk last weekend. And then I got to follow that up with going to Nashville with H and Jody. And so because I was the assistant spiritual director, Scott Oakey, our DS, was the spiritual director. So he was kind of in charge of the weekend. So I knew that all I really needed to do was just pack and be there at a certain time, right? I just show up, and he's got the schedule for the weekend. He tells me what I'm doing, what he's doing, and then we just work through the weekend together. So I was like, that's cool. You know, I like being able to just show up. And then this past week, these 3 days in Nashville, I knew H was driving. So once again, and Melissa McGurk, she made all our plans. She got the tickets, she got us hotel. That's a funny story, ask me after church. And then, so I had these two great people doing stuff for me. So once again, all I needed to do was pack and show up at the right time. And I trusted Scott and I trusted H that that's all I needed to do. Because then I could just relax and just let them lead, right? Why is it so much easier to do that sometimes with a person versus God? Why is it so much easier to put our trust in, you know, your boss or your neighbor, your family member, whatever, whoever that person is, right? But here comes the frustrating part. I didn't know what the plans were, right? I just showed up. I had no idea where we were. I mean, I knew we were going to the Nashville area. I knew H was driving, you know, but I didn't know any specifics. And I think that's where we get kind of about God, is because even though we can trust in him that he has a plan, we're all planners. We all want to kind of know what the next steps are. So we all get kind of frustrated by that. But Joseph, he just didn't seem to have that frustration. Now we've been talking about Joseph. H has been talking about Jacob and Joseph for this whole month of September, and we've been talking about trust and trusting in God. So just to refresh your memory, Joseph is the favorite son of Jacob, okay? And Jacob didn't hide that Joseph was his favorite. I mean, he just let it fly out there for everybody to see, right? So, of course, Joseph's brothers know, you know, he's the favorite, so they don't like him, you know? So they start plotting, trying to figure out how to get rid of him because they're just tired of him. So they come up with this plan. I know, we'll kill him, right? And then the one brother's like, no, can't have blood on our hands, no. So, all right, so they throw him in a pit. And they're going to try to figure out what to do next. What's the next thing to do? So they're all sitting around, they're eating, they're doing their thing. And this group comes by, and they decide to sell Joseph into slavery. I can tell you Joseph was not having a good day. I mean, first his brothers want to kill him, then they throw him in a pit, and now they've just sold him into slavery. So he ends up in one of Pharaoh's officials' houses, Potiphar's house, right? And because Joseph has God on his side, everything he touches just works. Everything works. So Potiphar's like excited because now he can hand off all of his household stuff to Joseph. So he has somebody running his entire household, right? Just hands it over. So now he can just relax, just kick back. But the one thing he didn't hand over, the one thing he didn't allow Joseph to be in charge of was his wife. But Potiphar's wife had other ideas, right? Because Joseph, he was good looking, built, strapping, right? So she starts, trying to entice Joseph into her bed. Joseph isn't having it. To the point where one day she catches him, right? And she holds on to his cloak. And this dude, Joseph, takes off running, leaves his cloak. So then she takes the cloak and she uses that to set up a lie about Joseph, about that he had come on to her, right? So Potiphar is above beyond angry, and he throws Joseph in prison. Here's the thing. Joseph knew, even through all of that stuff, Joseph knew that God was in control of his life, that God had a plan for Joseph. No matter what happened, no matter whether it was good or bad, Joseph always knew, always trusted that God had a plan. Joseph didn't spend time asking, why did this happen to me? What he did was, he approached it in this way. He said, what shall I do now? Right? He's in a pit. He's not screaming out, why, Lord, are you doing this to me? He asks God, what shall I do now? So he's in prison. Two of Pharaoh's guys get tossed into prison, right? The cupbearer and the baker. And one morning they wake up and Joseph sees that something's not quite right. They just don't look like they're having a good day. So he asks, what's going on? So they both share that they had a dream. And Joseph interprets their dreams. The cupbearer's dream is favorable. He's going to end up back in Pharaoh's house. The baker's dream, not so favorable. But Joseph asked the cupbearer, please, when you go back to the Pharaoh, please remember me. So in 3 days' time, they both go back to Pharaoh's house. The cupbearer, just as Joseph had told him, gets brought back into Pharaoh's house. The baker gets impaled. Now the cupbearer, he's just excited about being back. I mean, he spent 3 or 4 days in prison. He's excited about being back. So he completely forgets about Joseph. 2 years go by, and then the Pharaoh has a dream. And he's trying to figure out what it means. And so he calls in all these people. He calls in magicians and all these people who he thinks may be able to help him interpret what his dream means. And then the cupbearer's like, oh, you know what? Those 3 days you threw me in prison, there was a guy who interprets dreams. He interpreted my dream. I got back. He interpreted the baker's dream. We all know what happened there. So the Pharaoh calls for Joseph, and he brings Joseph in. And this is what the Pharaoh says. It says, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph, this is Joseph's reply. Joseph says, I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. So you take a guy who's just been in prison for at least over 2 years. He has the opportunity to take, some favor for himself and say, sure, interpret dreams, that's me, I can do that, to try to get himself out of prison. But that's not what he does. He passes the favor to where it belongs. He passes it on to God. And Joseph interprets the Pharaoh's dreams. And what he interprets is this. I know, I'm a heavy breather, sorry. 7 years. They're going to have 7 years of great abundance. 7 years of abundance, so much that they're just not going to know what to do with it. But then here's the downfall. After those 7 years, then you're going to have 7 years of famine. And those 7 years of famine is going to be so bad, so horrible, that you're going to completely forget about the good 7 years. So Pharaoh's trying to figure out what he's going to do. So he decides to put Joseph in charge. And so for those 7 years, Joseph is just stockpiling all the abundance. He's taking a percentage of food and all of those things, right? Grain. And he's stockpiling it. Because he knows what's coming. And he knows, because God told him, it's going to be far worse than the 7 years of abundance. And the Pharaoh is so excited about Joseph, about the dream, about what he can do. And he tells him, he says, you shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So Pharaoh still holds his title. He's still Pharaoh. He still gets the big seat, right? But other than that, Joseph is in charge of everything. Then famine hits. People are starving. They don't have food. So Jacob says, all right, has his sons. He says, here's money. Here's silver. Go to Egypt and get us provisions. Now, he doesn't send Benjamin. He just sends the older sons. So they go, and who do they meet when they get there? But they meet Joseph. Here's the thing. None of the brothers recognize him. None of them know who he is. But Joseph knows who they are. And he messes with them a little bit. He calls them spies. And he asks them questions about their dad and about their family. And they tell him that they have this little brother, Benjamin. So Joseph says, one of you has to stay. The rest of you go back and then bring your other brother with you. Only then will I truly believe that you're not spies. Well, they weren't really thrilled with that idea, but that's what they did. But Joseph he sent them off. He sent them off with the money they brought. He sent them off with enough food for them for their travels, and then for once they got home. So they get home and they share everything that had happened with Jacob. And Jacob's distraught because he's already lost one son. He's already lost Joseph. Right? And now this person in Egypt is holding another son who he is just assuming is probably dead. So now he's lost two, and now you want me to send Benjamin in? I'm not going to do it. He just refuses to do it. But they go through all of the provisions that they brought. So Jacob says to his sons, he says, you got to go back and get us more. I'll send more money. And his sons say, absolutely not. I'm not doing it. We're not doing it unless you send Benjamin with us. And Jacob doesn't want to do it because he's scared. He doesn't trust what's going to happen. But finally he gives in. And he allows them all to go back. And they have double the silver that they had the first time. And they get back to Egypt. And all of the brothers, including Ben, come in. And Joseph sees them. And he is so overcome with emotion that he has to excuse himself from the situation. And then he goes out and he weeps. Body-racking weeping. Because he's finally seen all of his brothers. And then he collects himself and he goes back out. And it says, then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. And when they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed. Do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there has been a famine in the land. And for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing and reaping. But God has sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. Now, I like my siblings. I would say I love them most of the time. Most of them. You know, we all have our moments, right? But I'm not sure how I would feel if, you know, they wanted to kill me, threw me in a pit, sold me to slavery, which then caused me to be tossed into prison for over 2 years. I mean, granted, I'm, you know, in Pharaoh's house running Pharaoh's stuff now, but I'm not sure how I would take that if I saw them again. Right? But Joseph's, his faith was so strong. His trust wasn't in his brothers. He loved his brothers. He loved his father, but that's not where his trust was. That's not where his faith was. His trust and his faith was in his God. And he knew that even though things happen in our lives, he knew God had a plan. It says, although Joseph's brothers had wanted to get rid of him, God used even their evil actions to fulfill his ultimate plan. He had sent Joseph ahead to preserve their lives, save Egypt, and prepare the way for the beginning of the nation of Israel. God is sovereign. His plans are not dictated by human actions. When others intend evil toward you, remember that they are only God's tools. As Joseph said to his brothers, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. He brought me to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Now, I think if you look back over your life, you may not have seen God in the moment. And I hope that maybe over the next week or so that you really take some time and kind of look back over your life, over your journey. Because in the moment, you may not have realized that God was with you. But I think now if you take some time and you really kind of look at it, you'll see that all along the way, there were things, people, situations, whatever it was, that God was placing those in your life to keep you moving forward, to keep you on the right path so that he could fulfill his plan that he has for you. I know, I look back, I can see that there were people, right? You know that when you get like on, is it MapQuest or Google Maps or whatever, when you want to look at the view and it picks up a little person and just kind of drags it and then just drops it and you're on the street and you get to look around? That's what I envision. I envision God just picked up this person and said, we're just going to place that person, bloop, right there. Hopefully, Andrea won't screw this one up, and she'll meet this person, and she'll start moving in the right direction, right? God has a plan. We don't always see it. We get frustrated because we don't know it, but it doesn't mean it's not there. It's always there. You just have to trust. And then, the really cool thing happens is when you realize that God has a plan and you realize that there are some things going on in your life and you can pinpoint, yes, that is a God moment, right? Then you get the opportunity to share God's plan. And the most powerful thing we can do is share our story.
The pivotal moment in my life came in this church about a month ago. I work in a skilled nursing facility as a physical therapist assistant. We had a really bad state survey where the state told us we could no longer be taking the admits that we were taking. We were limited to 2 per day. We normally take 15 to 20 a day. The corporate office stepped in and said we weren't taking any more admits until the staff is retrained and we can clear all these violations that we received. The company was committed to maintaining full-time hours for everybody but the therapy staff, and that kind of put me and everybody else in a tailspin. Wasn't quite sure how I was going to pay my bills once the discharges happened and there were no more admissions. I started to drink a whole lot, was eating more, wasn't sleeping. I was in tears more often than not. And I still came to church, and on that last sermon before H went on his mission trip, he ended the sermon with, sometimes we have to give our problems to God. And I heard that loud and clear, but I've heard it before. A couple nights later, I went to bed, and I tossing and turning, and I finally said, I can't do this anymore. I said, God, this is yours. I obviously can't control it. There's nothing I'm going to do to make it better. So I'm giving it to you. Excuse me. I woke up the next morning more refreshed than I'd been in a very long time. I didn't have those worries. I went about doing my thing, working the few hours that I was working, called contacts, tried to get leads on jobs. I dropped a resume off, wasn't promised an interview. I got a 15-minute interview, and the next day I had a part-time gig making considerably more than I'm making now. Then my boss called and offered me bits of work here and there. Since then, I've been working full-time or full-time with overtime with no questions. I feel my faith has gotten so deep and so, it's just nonstop. I feel wonderful. Heart's clear, my mind's clear. The people that I surround myself with, family, coworkers, have noticed a positive effect in me. I'm a much calmer person. I don't give up control that easily. I'm kind of hard driving at times, and they've all noticed that I'm a lot calmer. I don't sweat the small stuff so much anymore. And I try to take every day as it's given to me. I would tell anybody that's faced with a challenge or multiple challenges that we're not in control. I know we want to be, and I know that we think we are, but we're not. And we need to learn to give it to the man that is in control, and he will help us every step of the way, as he's helped me. At the end of the day, I'm tired. I put in a 8-9+ hour day, but my spirit's not tired. I continue to have that peace.
Amen. Amen. The most powerful thing that we can do when we have a God moment is to share it. Because there's somebody out there who doesn't trust, who doesn't believe. And all it takes is for one person to show them who God truly is. Joseph could have asked why. He asked, "What shall I do?" I think we all need to take some time and just ask. Putting our trust in God and ask, "What shall I do?"